It just drives you crazy because it's been such a persistent theme for this season. And like today, I thought it came down to a couple of very simple things. The offense was so slow and stagnant out of the halftime. Like these guys come out, and Joel had been absolutely cooking New York for most of the first 24 minutes. And early, it was a little bit of like, okay, get Joel the ball a few times, and then we'll all stand around while he's great and wins us the game. And when that didn't happen, it didn't feel like they were urgent enough about getting into their sets. Now, Nick Nurse did talk about New York played more physical, played, got into them a little bit more in the second half. And so you give them a little bit of credit for how it unfolded. Frankly, and I know this is red meat for Knicks fans, given the discourse this year, I think anytime Karl Anthony Towns was out of the game was probably good for the Knicks. So his foul trouble that he was dealing with was ended up backfiring on the Sixers in a weird way. But the other big thing, and I know you guys have probably hammered it throughout the show, the offensive rebounding just absolutely killed them. And you know that that's a problem playing the Knicks. Having Josh Hart available this time, which he's been, I believe he was out for at least the last matchup, if not the last two, if I remember correctly. So that played a big role. But, when guys like Landry Shamet are getting offensive rebounds and recycling the ball, that's a total team-wide failure at that point. And I think it's all interconnected. When you aren't scoring and they're getting into early offense, they're getting the matchups they want, they're stretching you out, you're going to have guys scattered all over the floor. It's harder to rebound. It's harder to prevent those second chance opportunities. So I thought one thing fed another. And then when they score, they're able to bunker down and play half-court defense. And when it's Mitch Robb and OG and McHale and Josh Hart, and you don't have the two halves of the Brunson Cat 1-5 out there, that also makes them a much tougher defensive team. So a lot of different things all interconnected in that third quarter.
And to your point, man, I mean, it was 26-4 second chance points in favor of New York because of that number that you just laid out. It's going to be tough to win. Look, you give them credit, as we always do in the fourth quarter, one of the best teams in the league in that final frame because they fight back the way that they do. But a 26-4 disadvantage because of those offensive rebounds, it's going to put you in a big hole.
Yeah, and Nick Nurse talked about it a little bit after the game, and his point was, we've had these games, right, where the other team gets a lot of offensive rebounds, but in many cases, they're at least able to do the same thing on the other end, where they can either equal or get close to that number on the offensive glass. And so, you don't want to give them up on your own end, but you're at least taking the fight to the other team on the other end. And they just were not successful at doing that today. It's a lot of one and dones, a lot of turnovers in the early portion of the third quarter where the game got away from them. So I think this is one that, in spite of the officiating shenanigans at the end of the game that a lot of people will probably key in on, it really was lost in the third quarter. Because I think other than that stretch, this was a pretty well-played game by them. Like, they fought in the fourth quarter, and they were the better team in the first half.
Yeah, 26-4, like we talked about, second chance points, 53-38 discrepancy rebounds, 19 offensive rebounds for the Knicks. That all being said, no Andre Drummond today, no Andre Drummond last game. Mm-hmm. Any reason behind him not being able to get some minutes tonight?
Well, we did ask Nurse if he considered putting Andre out there, and he flat out said no. So it was not in the cards for whatever reason. I think, Roy, the big thing is that Nurse has been trying to give Adem a runway here to win this job outright if he can do it. I think it's a guy the organization is invested in. This is not me. Don't aggregate this. I'm going to be Brian Windhorst right now. But I do think if you read between the lines a little bit, they are probably preparing for a reality where they move Drummond at the deadline. Like, he is a guy on a slightly elevated contract. And so if they're going to make a move, he's someone that is likely to be involved. And so if you know that, if you're at least somewhat soft planning for that, that suggests to me that in the weeks leading into the deadline, you got to see if Adem can hold up. And whether that means you don't trade Andre or you look to maybe add a different veteran big at the deadline for a little cheaper, I'm not sure. But maybe that's a little bit of it. But Nick didn't even think about it today, which I was surprised to hear him say, given how that game played out.
Right. So with that, talking about the backup bigs, let's talk about the man there in the middle that continues just this fantastic play. Had the 28 in the first half, finished with 38. And as you pointed out, the things did slow down there in the third quarter. But Kyle, again, another double-double for him, a 30-point double-double, and the way that he has played. And after the little scare with the knee, finished the game off with 35-plus minutes there tonight. What did you see from the big fella in this particular performance?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a much better first half, but I think the stuff that they did down the stretch where I'm sure you guys noticed when Nick tried to sub Justin Edwards in to intentionally foul Mitchell Robinson, and they ended up playing small ball. I thought Joel did a really good job of leveraging that to their advantage, where he got OG down to right around the, 8 feet out, 6 feet out, drew the double, and then he's firing it out to the perimeter to generate open threes. They got good offense out of that. So I thought there was some very good crunch time execution from him, in addition to ran the floor hard enough to get an offensive rebound and a putback at one point late in that game, which I think what we're seeing these last few games especially is that the conditioning is better. He just looks like he's in more of the dominant Joel Embiid mode that we came to expect over the years that I think, frankly, a lot of us didn't think would be able to come back at this point. And I think I'm just so encouraged by the general mobility, fluidity, physicality that he's showing right now. So, yeah, he was not as good in the second half, had some misfires on passes, turnovers, and whatnot. I think overall you have to be super happy with where he's at.
Yep.
And now it's just like, how far does the ecosystem shift? Because we talked a lot about, hey, Joel's got to fit into what these guys are doing. And that made sense in a world where you're getting maybe like 70%, 80% Joel. But if you're getting a guy who can score 28 points and a half and do it where he's, 10 to 12 from the field,
yes,
6 to 7 from the free throw line, and is just flat out dominant, there is no fitting into the system for that type of player. That guy is the system. And so maybe we end up with a little bit of friction there. But I think given that he's still not playing back-to-backs and there are a lot of other opportunities for Maxey, VJ, and everybody else to thrive, I think you'll still see a balance of it all.
One guy that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet tonight, Kelly Oubre. Another pretty decent game, 14 points, 7 rebounds. Is this the starting lineup? Has he kind of solidified himself as that fifth member of that starting lineup?
I think so, Roy. And I think that's probably their best 5 when push comes to shove. It is also a group that, if you just look at how the playoffs tend to go, that's the type of lineup you end up playing, where everybody on the floor is a guy you would put the ball in their hands and try to attack. Oubre, just a more reliable offensive threat than Don Barlow is. Barlow might be a better rebounder, and he gives you an advantage in some of the bigger wing type matchups potentially. But I think Kelly just has a certain energy, if you want to say like dog mentality, whatever. He just has something to him and his personality that I think this group needs. Like, I think you can feel him come in a game, make a play, and it just energizes not just the team, but the whole fan base and the crowd and all that. And so I think he's been very good these last few games. When we talked to Nick before the game, talked a lot about Kelly Oubre and what he was seeing with the lineup. And I know that he said the other night that Oubre joining the starting lineup was a merit-based decision. It was not a matchup thing. And so I think this is as simple as he thinks Kelly is playing at a level that he deserves to start. And if he keeps playing like he did tonight, I just tend to think that'll hold up over the long term.
All right, we heard it in the pregame, Kyle, from your video, but just since you're here, could you take us into a little bit more of the early departure for the Sixers, anticipating the storm and beating the weather to Charlotte?
Yeah, so I think in a normal circumstance, they probably would have flown out tomorrow, and maybe they even get a practice in tomorrow where it's a 3 p.m. game, so you still get rest in tonight. You come back in, have a film day, have a practice session, and then fly out mid-afternoon. They saw the forecast and are like, we're getting out of here on Saturday night. A lot of them showed up in sweatsuits to the game accordingly because they're going to head right to the airport. So they will be bunkered down in Charlotte tomorrow, or tonight and then tomorrow, hopefully. I guess we'll have to see what happens with regards to the weather there and how that might impact, people going to the game and whatnot there. But they're staying very close to the arena down there as well. So Nick Nurse joked before the game, as I know you guys saw, be heading over with our winter coats and practicing or getting a shoot around in as long as we're able to. So they, like everybody else, being impacted by snowpocalypse.
Kyle, it also impacts because it's a back-to-back. They have to get out of there to get back here, where we're obviously expecting what we're expecting and to see all the news about the airports. And yes, they fly differently than everybody else, but they still have to get out of there and off the ground. So that's also another storyline to it. 8 o'clock start on that Tuesday, but we'll see how it all plays out, man.